This is chapter 37, entitled Musical Reading, Schubert, Schumann, and the Early Romantic Lied. So this is part of our unit on secular song, and that's what Lied is. So our highlights of this chapter: typical romantic song structures include strophic and through composed forms. Strophic, every stanza has the same music. Through composed, it starts and there are no clear sections. It just proceeds and unfolds from the beginning to the end. Some songs fall between the two shapes of whether they're strophic or through composed, modified strophic. The German art song or Lied for solo voice and piano was a favored romantic genre. Composers also wrote song cycles that unified a group of songs by poems or theme. So you take miniatures and you put them together as some kind of unifying factor, and it now becomes a cycle of songs or miniatures. The poetry of the Lied projects themes of love and nature. Favored poets were Johann Wolfgang von Goethe and Heinrich Heine. You mentioned that. So we're going to sample a Lied by Franz Schubert, and really this is what Franz Schubert is remembered for, his Lieder, which is plural for Lied. He wrote over 600 Lieder. That's hard to put your arms around, 600 Lieder, and two masterful song cycles. His Lied Elf King, Erlkönig, is through composed Lied based on a Danish legend related in a dramatic poem by Goethe, is one of his most famous songs, and we're going to listen to that. He wrote that when he was 18 years old. And then we're also going to sample a song from a song cycle written by Robert Schumann. He wrote over 200 Lieder, many inspired by his fiancée, pianist and composer Clara Wieck. So she became Clara Wieck Schumann. These include A Poet's Love, which in German is Dichterliebe, and the song is in German, a song cycle set to the poetry of Heine again. So we're going to sample a song from his song cycle. The form in the Romantic period had some changes from the Classical period, which the Classical was a lot of binary and ternary and multi-movement compositions. So miniatures are very popular. Miniatures meaning small pieces that just have a width of the motion. And so the Lied and the Lieder is an example of a miniature. And then the other things, there was these giant compositions that required lots of performers and many movements. And then there was program music that tells a story. And I guess, this Lied we're going to sample does tell a story, of course. And then the other popular thing was the use of cyclical material to provide structural unity. And that's what the song cycle by Schumann will be an example of. As far as expressive trends, very popular element was extreme emotional states. And we're going to find that that's true in the piece we're going to listen to. Nationalism, where you're proud of something about your country, and you can make a connection between that, and we're going to see that as part of our example. Fascination with nature, that's part of our example, and fascination with the macabre and the Gothic and the supernatural, and we're going to find that's part of our example. So Lied in general is from the Romantic period, which is 1820 to 1900. Lied is simply is German for the word song. The plural of Lied is Lieder. And I'm going to tell you a little joke, and maybe it'll help you remember this. But it's used to say that when you were in Germany and you would ask somebody to see their leader, they would show you their MP3 player, or now would be the phone. So Lied is one of many words in another language that literally translated means only song, but the word used in the native language has taken on a meaning of its own. And we've mentioned this before, words like chanson, air, aria, lied, and there's others. So lied or lieder are songs where the text is written by a great poet and borrowed by a composer, and the poem is used by the composer. So you start with great poetry that inspires you to interpret that poem with music. So the two go together. So not does he only use the poem, the composer, but he embodies the spirit of the poem in the music. A lied is for piano and voice, and the two will musically help to tell the story of the poem. The first composer to write lieder is Franz Schubert, who wrote over 600 lieder, and I had to put that in there, the wow part. So it was sung by amateurs and professionals. It was performed at home and in the concert hall. Uh, Prominent composers that wrote lieder were Schubert, Schumann, Brahms, Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel, that's Felix Mendelssohn's sister, and Clara Wieck Schumann, Robert Schumann's young wife. And of course, the poets of Goethe and Heine were very uh, popular poetry writers, and why not start with good poetry? So there's different kinds of poetry, and we've talked about that before. Lyric poems, a ballad is a real long poem. It tells a big story. And of course, the lieder is about this unity of expression, the text and the music. And the song cycle is a group of lieder unified by some theme. Here is a nice picture that shows us a painting that shows us an example of a live music being performed in a salon, right? With a small chamber music type situation. And likelihood is this person is singing and the piano player, probably lieder, and enjoying this. I wonder if this room really had a pillar like this, or did the painter just stick it in there? Franz Schubert was one of these people we refer to as bohemian lifestyle, and he had a following, a group of people that were his friends and were support his art. He's an individual that how do you write 600 songs? Well, you get up in the morning and you write a song, and then you take a break, have lunch, come back, and you write another song. And over a year, you could write to a day, you could write 600 songs. I don't know how long it took him to write 600 songs, but he did work at it every day. And then later in the day, his friends would come over and they would get together. He Homosexuality was that's not the word I wanted to use. I wanted to use the word of uh, sexually transmitted diseases like syphilis. It was a serious illness because there was no treatment for it, and if you were identified to uh, be have syphilis, it was like a death sentence, and it might take a long time, 10 years, 20 years, and during the process of having syphilis, that it would go into remission, and you could have a wife and have sexual relations, and it's not contagious when it was remission. But the individual that had it was going to die early in life, and it made people uh, lose their sanity. And this is part of the process. So anyway, this is an example of Schubert with his friends, and supposedly he's walking here, and painted by one of his friends. And they were called Schubertians. And Franz Schubert did have syphilis, and he died a young man. So again, we talked about the strophic and the through composed. Franz Schubert, he was only, 31 years old when he died. And it said that he was bisexual, and because of his bohemian attitude, it's like, I don't care about uh, things and certain things, and it got him into trouble. Um, and he was a brilliant composer from early on in life, right? Vienna was a big music center and part of, the city in Austria. And people now lose sight that Austria was a major military and political power in Europe for a long time, and they were responsible for fighting Napoleon, and had like 4 wars with Napoleon, and finally he was defeated by the Viennese. But so Vienna was a rich city and a beautiful city of a lot of music for several hundred years. Composers, famous composers, including Beethoven. So Franz Schubert was in the Vienna Boys Choir, which is a famous choir that still exists to this day and travels around. They have been to El Paso to sing, and so Schubert was a member of that. He learned music. He didn't want to become a school teacher, although he was encouraged to become one. He again struggled financially, so it was like money was not the prime goal of him, a bohemian artist, if you will. So even as a teenager, he had a lot of recognition as a musician. He's buried near Beethoven in Vienna. So a ballad is a type of poem, right? A genre of story-like poems that became increasingly popular in England and Germany during the 18th century. A fairly long poems alternated narrative and dialogue filled with romantic adventure and supernatural incidents. Oh yeah. Famous leader composers, Schubert, Schumann, Brahms, who wrote all types of music, Mahler into the 20th century, Richard Strauss, Hugo Wolf. The poem The Elf King, right? And the song composition by Franz Schubert. He wrote it when he was 18, and it was immediately a success. And the poem has 4 characters, and I'm going to read the poem if you don't mind. But it's essential to know the poem if you want to appreciate the lead. 4 characters: narrator, I think that's spelled wrong, father, the child, and the elf king, right? The elf king is a spooky character, king of the elves. It's not a real person. It's a part of something you tell your kids about before they go to bed. So whoever is touched by the elf king must die. This is this spooky folklore character. And so this is one of the characteristics of the style, of the romantic style, is to use folklore. Here is a painting, right? The Elf King, which again, many people would know the story of the Elf King, so this is a popular subject. And here is a painting that is showing uh, man on horseback with his child and the Elf King, and so the poem is through composed, and so the music is as well. It's a ballad, so everyone keeps telling it tells a story. But again, there's four characters in this, and you'll hear this these triplets that more or less represent the horse's hooves, and the Elf King is trying to lure the child from the father. And the father tries to calm the child. So here is the poem. Let me find it and read it. So it again, which is really interesting is Schubert uses a different range of the voice. It's one person singing, but for each of the characters, the narrator, the father, the child, and the Elf King, he uses a different range in the voice. So you can help identify which character is telling the part of the ballad. Or and so, um, who rides so late through night and wind? It is the father with his child. He has the boy close in his arm. He holds him safely. He keeps him warm. This is the narrator. Then the father says, my son, why do you hide your face in fear? The son says, Father, don't you see the Elf King? The Elf King with his crown and train? Father says, Son, it's just a streak of mist. The Elf King, you dear child, come with me. I'll play very lovely games with you. There are lots of colorful flowers by the shore. My mother has some golden robes. The son says, Father, Father, don't you hear the Elf King whispering promises to me? And then the father says, Be still, stay calm. It's the wind rustling in the dry leaves. That's all you hear. And the Elf King says, Fine lad, do you want to come with me? My daughter will take care of you. My daughters lead the nightly dance, and they'll rock and dance and sleep you to sleep, sing you to sleep. And son says, Father, Father, don't you see the Elf King's daughters over there in the shadows? And the father, Son, I see it clearly. It is the gray sheen of the old willows. It's just the shadows. Elf King says, I love you. Your beautiful form delights me. And if you're not willing, then I will use force. And the son says, Father, Father, now he's touching me. The Elf King has done me harm. And the narrator says, the father shudders. He rides swiftly. He holds the moaning child in his arms. With effort and urgency, he reaches the courtyard. In his arms, the child was dead. Now, that has nature, has spookiness in it, has the folklore in it. It's a very interesting poem. And the question is like, well, what happened? And that's a good question. I'll ask you. Let's watch this. This is a performance by Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, a very famous tenor who is now deceased. And look at his expression on his face. And I definitely put the words, uh, overlaid the words on the video so that you can really enjoy the poem in English. He sings it in German. And again, every um, time there's a character change between the narrator and the father, you can see the expression on his face change and then the voice range. So let's listen to this.
Tanzen und singen dich ein. Mein Vater, und siehst du nicht dort, Herr Königswächter am düsteren Ort? Ein Sohn, ich sehe es genau, es scheinen die alten Weiden so grau. Ich liebe dich, mich reizt deine schöne Gestalt, und bist du nicht willig, so brauch ich Gewalt. Mein Vater, jetzt fasst mich an, der König hat mir ein Leids getan. Dem Vater grauset's, reitet geschwind, hält in Armen das ächzende Kind. Erreicht den Hof mit Mühe und Not. In seinen Armen das Kind war tot. Good night.
So what happened? Why did the child die? He really wasn't touched by the Elf King. What do you think happened? Well, speculation is, who knows, right? But maybe this child was sick and the father was hurrying to try to get him some medical assistance, and perhaps he was hallucinating. So if Franz Schubert wrote 600 songs and we heard one, what should we do? Well, we should listen to another one of his songs, even though it's not part of the text. This is a very short song, and it's entitled Calm Sea. And the poem goes, deep calm rules the water. The sea is motionless, and the sailor looks worriedly at the smooth surface that surrounds him. No breeze from any quarter, dead calm, appalling. For vast distances, there is not a single wave. If you're a sailor, the worst thing that could happen is no wind. So this is another perfect example of the words being portrayed with the music. That will lower your blood pressure. Another songwriter, secular songwriter, Robert Schumann, and the song Cycle. So he lived from 1810 to 1856, only 46 years old. He also died of syphilis. And he did go mad at the end of his life. And it's a very interesting story that is kind of a Hollywood story. So he studied piano with this famous piano teacher in Germany, Friedrich Wieck, and he fell in love with one of the students, and they were engaged to marry, and that fell off. And then he fell in love with the teacher's daughter, which was significantly younger than he was, and the father discouraged their being together and falling in love. But Robert did wait until she was an adult, and then they fell in love, and it's an amazing love story between the two of them. And it goes on and gets more complicated because Johannes Brahms, which we're not going to listen to now, was like a third generation. And Robert Schumann injured his hand with some kind of contraption he made to try and help him play the piano better. And he wasn't able to play the piano well anymore, and he turned to composition. He had a publication that was about music, and it was very popular among musicians. And so if he mentioned somebody's name or talked about some composition, had it helped that individual. So Johannes Brahms came to see Clara and Robert later in her life, and he was just a young man, but asked for help, and he did get help from Robert. And but over their lifetime, the three of them were friends, and Clara fell in love with Brahms, young Brahms, and then her husband died, and then she wanted to get married with Brahms, and Brahms, in his memoirs, said he uh, decided to remain free, whatever that means. So it's quite a story that, much more detailed than I just mentioned there, but it should be made into a movie. So I hope one of you, when you become a movie producer, you consider that as a movie to make. So Robert, in his 46 years, wrote 200 Lieder, several song cycles, 4 symphonies, and piano music. Here's Robert. So the song we're going to sample from his cycle of songs. And the cycle consists of 16 poems by Heinrich Heine, our favorite poet. And so of the 16 songs, the cycle, it follows a psychological progression about love, from, freshness of love to complete despair. And isn't that what love has, those extreme emotions and sides of it? It's like, wow, this is so great. This is so bad. And the song we're going to hear is very short, and it's entitled In the Lovely Month of May. It's the first song in the cycle, and you can just hear how fresh the love is. And again, the music, the poem is being told by the piano. And so together, the text and the composition, that's what it's all about. It evokes the fragility of love, melancholic mood, lost or unrequited love. Okay, this video has some flowers in it and things, but anyway, it is what it is. Here is Robert with Clara. And Clara, again, they were madly in love, and for their whole life, she dedicated her performing of music, because she was a wonderful musician. Of course, her dad was the teacher of Robert, and she learned from her father as well. And she performed Robert's music in public to encourage the popularity of her husband's music. And so she kind of suppressed her own ambitions to support her husband. And she was a wonderful composer as well. In the lovely month of May, as all the buds were blooming, then in my heart did love rise up. In the lovely month of May, as all the birds were singing, then did I confess to her my longing and desire. Did you ever feel like in the springtime does encourage love? We don't have such a dramatic spring over here, but other parts of the world and the country where you have a severe winter, and then when spring comes, it's just a magical time, and it makes you crazy. We'll sample that in Stravinsky's music. So here is the music example.
schönen Monat Mai, als alle Knospen sprangen, da ist in meinem Herzen die Liebe aufgegangen. Im wunderschönen Monat Mai, als alle Vögel sangen, da hab ich ihr gestanden, mein Sehnen und Verlangen.
The three generations of Robert, 1810-1856, his wife Clara, 1896. So she was 9 years younger than her husband. And Johannes Brahms, 1833. So Brahms would have been 14 years younger than Clara. But Brahms and Clara did fall in love, although after Robert died, Brahms said, I decided to remain free. Very interesting character also, and we'll listen to some Brahms music later. I want to play just a very short piece. It's not a song, but it's a piece of music written by Robert Schumann, and it's from a cycle of piano pieces, 21 short piano pieces. He went to a carnival, and this is really like a Mardi Gras, right? We know what Mardi Gras is, but Carnival is the same thing. I think that's kind of what they call it in South America. But these people were there in costumes, and it was a grand party. So he wrote 21 pieces, no words, about different characters at the party. And number 13 is Estrella, and actually it's a name of one of his girlfriends that he was engaged to, and Estrella was a student of Clara Wieck's father as well. So enjoy this. Now, this piece, it's so forward-looking. It's really ABA very quickly, and there's such a huge contrast between the two sections. The beginning, it sounds like a tango or something, and then there's just calmness in the beat, and then back to the beginning, a sharp tango. So enjoy this. Very original music. So a review of some terms. Art song, a song set to a high quality literary text, usually accompanied intended for concert performance. And Lied is not the only type of art song, but it is an art song. German for song, literally, Lied, most commonly associated with the art song of the 19th century, usually accompanied by piano. Leaders is plural. Lead. Song cycle, group of songs that are unified musically or through their texts. And we will use that word cycle in many different ways. Like the example of the piano piece we heard is part of a cycle of piano pieces. And there's symphonic compositions are a cycle. There's an opera that's a cycle. More than one tells the story, the whole story. And again, strophic, same music is repeated with every stanza. Through compose, song structure that is composed from beginning to end without repetitions of large sections. A melodie is an accompanied French art song of the 19th and 20th centuries, the French parallel to the German lied. We're not going to sample any melodie, but you should know that it exists. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 37 on leader.